Hi guys, and welcome to another Pieandbelle class. We're going to look at this rusty padlock today. If you'd like to join our classes or if you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, then just click on my bio. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is make our wash colour up. I'm going to make a really pale mint green because that's the lightest colour in the picture. So I'm going to mix my turquoise with my lemon yellow. But I'm also going to make some colour for the rusty kind of weird spots on the wood, the kind of broken parts of the wood, just because I want them in soft at the first point as well. So what I'm doing is I've pipetted a little bit of water next to that colour and I've made a dark colour, and then I've put some of that colour into that pipetted water and made a wash colour as well, which is going to be lighter. And now I'm making two tones of brown with the brown and the yellow ochre. And I'm going to cover my paper apart from my padlock if I can. I'm going to try not to go into the padlock at all, and I'm going to wash all the way around with this really pale mint green. Now you don't have to worry about it being overly even because obviously you're going to wash all over this anyway and put detail in over the top, but you just want the colour in most places. And then you can see I'm going to swap up and take it in that little centerpiece as well, and the little kind of hook that locks it onto the door as well. Now I'm just putting in some idea of where the shadows are, where the darker colours are. We're going to work over this anyway, but it will just give me an idea of where the picture is coming out from and where to work from. So there's a really dark streak down that side there. And again, we can tidy this all up in a minute, so don't overly worry yourself. There's a kind of forward piece of wood in front of it to the right there as well, so I just wanted to kind of give myself an idea of where that came in as well. And now I'm going to take my small brush and kind of go back and forth to kind of give myself some effects of the wood panelling in these shadows. So I'm just going back and forth with that kind of damp brush to give myself the darker hues where I want them to be. And I've definitely got a little kind of triangle of light there in between the lock where the kind of shadow is, but I'm just going to put that in there. Now you can see I'm just putting in some colour for where the wood is broken and kind of rusty brown colour. So I'm just doing a mixture of those two light and dark browns. And I'm going to pad out because I want them to be kind of uneven toned, so I don't want all the dark to be in one spot. I'm just washing that little bit around just because I could see I was getting a bit of a strange mark there, so I'm just washing that out a little bit and tabbing it. Right, so now it's dry. I'm still using that same palette because they're the same colours basically. And I'm going to make up a darker colour again, and then I'm going to start bringing this in for wood panelling. So I'm going to use my flat brush and I'm going to start bringing it in for wood panelling. I'm going to turn my board so that my arm goes the right way for doing straight lines, but I'm going to wash these out anyway. I'm going to put them in and then wash them out, so I can use my straight line, my straight brush to get my straight lines. I'm going to put some idea of panelling in, and then I'm going to get my wash brush and I'm going to make sure it's damp, not soaking wet, because I don't want to wash it into the colour. And this is where you'll start getting that much more deeper turquoise colour coming through, because obviously that pale mint green was much more of the background colour. It's a much more turquoisey colour over the top, so I've made sure I've made it a little bit more blue this time. And it's a mixture of putting them in first and then washing them out and then putting extra ones in until you're happy with it. I'm also going to darken up that area down there again where there's definitely a shadow of something. You can't see it in the picture, but there's definitely a shadow of something kind of cast over that bottom corner. So soften them out or put them in wherever you're happy with them. And then bring them down here. I am going to go over those kind of rusty brown spots. I'm not really going to overly worry about keeping them perfectly brown at this point because I am going to come in with darker colours over the top as well. So at this point I'm just trying to get some sort of wood effect by putting the stripes on. And I'm going to come in with a really tiny brush later and really kind of sort out those stripes. So at this moment I'm just getting that middle ground. And obviously it's that little tiny kind of curve of that bit, you've got to remember to keep that in as well. So you can see me changing up brushes when it suits me, you know, when I'm putting in, if it doesn't work with that brush, quickly swap out. That's why it's good to have all your brushes there. And what I'm doing now is adding some water to that light bit because I stroked over it. So I'm just adding some water into that light bit to kind of wash that out a little bit. And I'm going to darken these shadows, but I'm also going to darken these a bit more later. So I'm just putting in kind of where I want them to be. There's a definite triangle there of light that comes underneath that little bar that the padlock's on. So I'm really just depositing some colour in the darker areas at the moment. And now I'm continuing my stripes and washing them out because I want that all the way to the end. So I'm trying to separate that piece of wood at the front because there's a definite like separate piece of wood that's the same colour at the front. It's different to the back one, and these two panels out that are obviously the door that's been locked shut. So as you can see there, I'm putting in a dark colour, but then I'm using some water and washing it out so that it isn't a harsh line. It's only a harsh line on one side, and on the other side it's softened. So now I've gone in with some blue and brown, the ultramarine and burnt umber mixed with the turquoise to make a really deep dark green. I'm going to start bringing that colour over the top and into areas where I know it's really dark. So I'm using the straight line edge brush just to give myself some weird kind of shapes in those little wooden spots. And softening out those shadows if they're too harsh. Now the shadows and lights are really what will make this object look 3D at the end, so even though we're working a lot with colour and it's a really colour study, I don't want to neglect the shadows and lights because that will be what makes it pop out of the page. So if you struggle with getting shadows and lights, the best thing to do is to either look at the picture from far away or turn the picture into black and white on your phone. Then you can actually see where the darks and lights are. They are very imperative in getting that 3D effect on your image. If you go into that little kind of bar that's holding it, just tap it out like I just did, because obviously I went a bit too far up. I want to keep that shape. So I'm going to bring in some nice straighter lines over there. I'm really just trying to get that kind of effect of wood by stroking back and forth. Now I can see the outline of the padlock isn't particularly neat, and when I come in with the colour on the padlock it isn't particularly neat, but these things can all be sorted out a bit later, so don't overly worry yourself about them. So now I'm going to come in with the colours on my padlock. So I'm going to use loads of different colours. I want to have the base colour of a brown and a greyish colour. So I'm going to make up a brown, which is just the brown, and then I'm going to add the brown with the blue, so that's just burnt umber and then burnt umber mixed with ultramarine blue for the greyish colour. And then I'm going to make up those really kind of weird light greens and light turquoises that are kind of splotted into the actual padlock. And we're going to touch these in at different points in different levels of wateriness so that they kind of create all crazy shapes. So the first thing I want to do is make sure it's really, really wet. When you're filling in a shape like this, the best thing to do is to start at an area that you can work all your way around. So I can start at the top where it's kind of hidden behind the little bar, and then work my way around the whole shape. I'm bringing in that brown first, and then I'm going to bring in some of that blacky browny colour underneath. And because I've wet it, I'm going to have a little bit of time to play around with it. I'm going to push the colours around, and you'll also see during this I'm going to be putting the colours in, I'm going to be putting the greens in over the top, and then I'm going to be patting the colours out to give myself that light source, which is round the top left hand side of the bar of the padlock, and at the top there's a kind of shadow cast from the bar of the padlock, so I'm going to keep those in as well. And at the moment I'm just going to bring in those secondary tones, which are the greens and the blues, and then the last tone to bring in is that darker colour, which will go around the kind of bottom and up. You can see those really dark areas. So I'm just kind of going to go crazy basically. I'm going to play around with it. This is really fun to do. You can see me taking out the colour there, because it doesn't have to look exactly like the picture. You are just playing around with effects at this moment until you're happy with it. So you're just kind of chucking the paint in, taking it out, adding more colours in. I'm still not overly worrying myself about the outline of it. I can sort that all out later. But you can see I'm just touching in also just plain water, and that will give me weird little cauliflower effects, which will really add to this picture because it's got such a crazy lot of different patterns on it. Now I'm starting to think about the light and dark. Firstly the shadows, and secondly the shapes that are coming in the dark. So I'm leaving those little circular areas at the bottom because there is two kind of screwy weird circle bits there at the bottom. Not that it's really overly obvious in the picture, but I'm just putting them in anyway. I'm just kind of having an idea of them in there. So you can see by using water, I'm adding water to the picture, and then I'm drying off my brush with my fingers and I'm taking it out where I want those light sources to be, because again, like I said, secondary to the colour is making your object look 3D, and that is all in light and darks. All of it is just light and darks. That's the only way you're going to make an object look 3D, is to get the light sources in correctly. So now I'm just starting to bring in that darker tone over the top. I'm kind of following it. Now you can see here actually I've watered down that green and I'm touching that in, and that will look completely different to the colour in bold, the same with the turquoise. So I'm touching them in wherever I see little bits of them. I think I'd run out of blue then. And because it's so wet at this point, I do have quite a bit of time to kind of play around with this. I mean, this is done in fast forward ×2, but if you imagine this slowed down a little bit, I have played around with it for quite a long time before it's dried, because my paper is absorbent enough to hold the water for as much time as I can get. I am going to darken that cast shadow to the right as well, but at the moment I'm just trying to work in the padlock whilst I've got the time, whilst it's wet, and build up those different colours, but also keep that right hand side of that padlock arch dark, and also that kind of cast shadow down the right hand side of where the arch meets the padlock, and all to the right really it's the darker area with this. And you can see now it's coming together. Now I've got those darker colours in, so now I am actually trying to sort the kind of shape out a little bit. And as you see now, because it's hard to do that shape upside down, I'm actually going to turn the entire board upside down so that I can get that straight line in with my straight edge brush a lot easier. So do turn your paper around to help you out. There's no reason you can't change your picture around and move it whilst you're working on it. It actually helps immensely. And now you can start seeing it take a bit more shape. Definitely needs to have a dark edge down there. And you can start seeing how it is becoming a bit more 3D. And that is literally, like I said, due to where you're placing your light sources and your dark sources. That is all it is with 3D objects, is making sure that you put your shadows in the correct place, and that is what will make it look 3D. Again, I need to work on that little bar that's holding the padlock, so I'm going to start kind of getting that in. And again, you can work separately to when you've put the wash in, so all you do is you put your colour in and then you wash it out into the rest of the picture, so that you have more of a kind of not an outline, it's more of a kind of idea of that being a different section. So I'm definitely making sure I'm putting in shadows where they need to be, This is where I need to really sort that shape of that bar out to make sure it's symmetrical all the way across so that the bar is even all the way. And if it's becomes slightly narrower than the picture, really don't worry about it. You don't have to show anyone this picture. Like, people get so nervous about things not looking exactly as they did on the actual picture that you're copying from, but you never have to show anybody that picture that you're copying from, so you can adapt it. There could be a bar that's much narrower, there could be a padlock that's much skinnier. You really don't have to worry about it. I get really frustrated with people that want their picture to be absolutely exactly the same as the picture they're copying from, because I feel like actually it takes out a lot of the fun of playing around and learning new things and learning new methods if you kind of really make yourself obsessed with getting realism to a ridiculous point. So now I am going to start building in, I think I start building in that front section, because obviously at the moment it just looks like one big blob, the padlocky bit. I've managed to separate the bar, but I need to separate that front section from the top so that it looks like a top and a front, and I'll start doing that when I'm putting these colours in. So what I've done is waited a second for that to dry out a little bit, because it will give me different effects when I put in the colour at a different point. So you can see how I've just separated that top from that base there. I'm just sorting out the shape a little bit more and bringing in the darkness around the edges of those. So you can see how you can start popping it out. If anything is separate to anything else, so the bar that's going up and around is separate to the top, which is separate to the front, you need to show how that's working. You need to show how that is separated. So you need to put in either shadows or lines or something and then wash them out so that you can see that that is a separate area and it's not all just one blob. So now I'm coming in with a darker colour to try and give myself more of those woody, kind of broken wood effects that's going on. And I'm touching it in, just like printing it really, just printing different shapes in there and then taking out bits that I don't like and keeping bits in that I do like. And I kind of am following what I'm seeing, but also I know it's just broken wood, so it could look like anything. So it doesn't have to look exactly like the ones that are on there. I can make it up a little bit as I'm going along. So I'm just separating out that obviously closed door to make sure that that line comes all the way down, now that I've managed to put in my padlock, all the way down to the base of the padlock. So now is my last bit where I'm just tidying up things. I'm going to make some turquoise up and some kind of blacky colour with the brown and the blue, and this is just my tidying up area. So the turquoise, I'm going to fill out that left hand side of that arch of that padlock. I can see that there's a white spot there, so I'm going to fill that colour out, wash it out, and then you'll use a bit of kitchen roll to tap it away. So you put the colour in, push the colour into the rest of the picture, but then tap it away in the rest of the picture where there already is colour. So I think I did that a couple of times because it just wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And around the edge there, exactly the same thing. So this is what I'm talking about fixing colours, is that you just want to fix them as you're going. So now I'm just adding some light little effects of wood again. These are much lighter than I was putting in before, just literally a shade or two darker than the colour that is the base, just because I want to give a little bit more effect of that wood, and I'm darkening that corner, which I know is very dark. And I can see there's a light bit just at the base of that padlock there, so I'm going to bring some colour into that so it doesn't look so bleached out. So at this point I'm just kind of adding little tiny touches, but the one thing I am very concerned about at the moment is that that right hand slice of wood that's coming down in front of that padlock, at the far right, it doesn't look separated enough. So I am going to sort that out as well in a minute. So at the moment I'm going to make this shadow a lot darker, because that will make my padlock appear a lot darker and more 3D. So I'm bringing in that real dark colour down the edge there. And I think I'm starting to put in the little kind of rust spots as well on here. I'll start putting them on in a minute. So at the moment I'm darkening that loop, but I am actually going to bring in those little rust spots. I can see that the shape of it's gone a bit weird at the bottom there, so I'm going to correct that as well. Got to bring that padlock up a little bit and shape that out so that it is, because at the moment it's kind of gone a bit angular. It needs to be more circular. So all these things that you think, oh my god, I've done wrong whilst you're doing it, you have time to correct it later with a nice tiny little brush. You don't have to put it in perfectly whilst you're using large brushes or, you know, flat end brushes. You can actually just come in and put them in later with a small brush. You have got time to play around with it. So you can see there I'm putting in the colour and then I'm drying the brush with my fingers and I'm fanning out the colour to where I want it to be. There's kind of strange wooden bit there, and again making sure that that is really kind of in the right place, that door line. So I'm just adding little bits into those wood now, and I'm striking up out of it so that it kind of looks splintered. So just tiny little strikes of that brown striking up, and then that really helps to make it look kind of like a splintered piece of wood. And this is where I'm going to start trying to separate this from the background, this front piece of wood. But I think I try with the turquoise, but it doesn't quite come in dark enough, so then I end up using that turquoise I've mixed with the ultramarine and the brown at the bottom, which is a really dark colour, and that helps me really get rid of that kind of merge of the two and makes it definitely a separate panel of wood. So you can see that I'm adding much more shadows and getting those dark rust spots on that little loop. And I am touching water around the edges of them to soften them out a bit. So obviously I want to bring that shadow a bit further in, because that really comes all the way up to this front pane of wood, and this is where I start separating that out. And you can now see that just adding that dark there really helped to separate that front panel out. I'm just softening that all into it. And you can see how that definitely helps. So I'm making up a dark grey-ish colour with the dark blue, the ultramarine blue and the brown, and I'm getting the idea of those little circular bits in. So I'm washing out those a little bit, just because they looked a bit harsh on their own. But I'm definitely going to separate that front panel so that you can see that it's a separate entity to the top and the base of that ring. So just getting those little added bits in will really pop it out. Put in some extra little details in those little broken wooden bits. And I think we're pretty much done. So I'm just going to take the tape off, and because this turquoise and brown is such a beautiful colour palette, it does look really nice with the white frame. And that is your final picture. So please do subscribe or contact me if you'd like to join our regular classes. But I hope you enjoyed this class.